Hello everyone, welcome to a bit of a late episode of Scouting Report. We had a bit of a technical issue, mainly broken shot. His mic wasn't working, so we couldn't record before. I never
Wait. We did the full episode yesterday. Was such a good episode with lots of funny quotes, great moments, probably the best League of Legends content ever created. In the history of League of Legends. And the record button wasn't pressed. Therefore, it's Manuel's fault.
I'm sorry, people. This is a bit on me, but to make up for it, we can just dive right into the games. Yep. We will talk about the predictions of last week, in particular those we found most interesting, and then we will predict what's going to happen tomorrow already, because we are already a bit late. Yeah. So go ahead, Broken Shard. Which series do you want to talk about?
Well, before we go on, it's important to note that any predictions that you guys might think we got wrong is actually not our fault. Yeah. When we make a wrong prediction, it's actually the players who fucked up, and not us. We're actually perfect and we never make mistakes. The couple ones that I wanted to talk about was Schalke H2K, the first one actually, and that's an interesting one because we actually got that prediction right, but it's more in the manner of how the game actually went out, because by all means Schalke should not have won that game. Vizicachi had probably the greatest play he's ever gonna make in his entire career.
Yeah, very likely.
Yeah, very likely, and that's not an insult to him. That's just more to kind of like comment on the gravity of how insane this play was, like literally game winning. But Schalke didn't look so hot, especially against the absolute worst team in the EULCS.
Well, I have to say that I get the feeling from H2K that if they manage to not int early game and just sort of die on random spots, I think they usually have pretty cohesive game plans, and I think this game was a bit of a tell that even though they are struggling so much, they still retain that bit of good understanding that I think got them to playoffs the previous split.
I mean, I also just want to comment on Schalke because they are currently 6-4, but I don't think that they're playing like the fourth place team in the EU right now.
Oh, I agree.
I think that coming into the future matches, H2K look a bit better and they don't look as shit, let's say. But Schalke, I think we can expect them to start losing games to the better teams.
Yeah, I wouldn't put... We were talking on this on the previous episode. I wouldn't put Schalke on my top 4 and top 5.
Either.
And I seem to remember you neither. So yeah, they are for me a bit of a... Not a downward trend, but it's sort of like a team that shows little development week to week. I do not get the sense that I am watching a team that improves and understands previous mistakes and builds on them. So that's what worries me coming into playoffs, because of course that's what's going to determine who is the best on that particular patch.
Yeah, it's also important to note that like we both kind of agreed that this team is a team that has a lot of talent on paper.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Great players across the board, like even amazing. Like even though some games I think he's a dirty inter in his jungle pathing and early game plan, but he has moments that it shows that he deserves to be on that Schalke lineup. Nukeduck, obviously, everyone's talking about Nukeduck. The year of Nukeduck, he's definitely shed some of like those past negative connotations about him as a player, in my opinion. So I think it's not about players, it's just team. Like, they're not a team, and they're not really learning. So we're gonna have to see, though. I wouldn't put my money too much on a Schalke if you're trying to make predictions. Another one we wanted to talk about was... I think we definitely want to talk about Rocket G2, but there was at least one more. Yeah, Splice Vitality.
Yeah.
And Vitality in general and Splice in general, it's important to note that one is kind of on an upwards trend, which is Splice. I think they're doing a bit better as a team. They've kind of shaken off their early losses and kind of come together quite well, especially, I know you're going to talk about Circe for about 30 minutes now. But Vitality, on the other hand, they seem to be, at least especially this last week, not doing so hot. They've lost their last 3 games. Vitality have lost their last 3 games in a row, essentially.
For me, my issue with Vitality is not that I do not like that they are ballsy. Actually, that's one of my favorite qualities to watch on a team. But I do not get the sense that their setups are exactly super thought out. And in this Splice game, I think it was the best example where they are looking to dive, even though Niski has already backed, so Splice is able to match on the top lane even with an extra TP, and also the fact that Niski has items, so in the end they end up losing really hard, and from there on out the game just goes out of control. So yeah, for me Vitality is a bit on the Schalke box, where I think they are more creative overall, but I do not think they are like really improving on what the game fundamentals are long term.
I think that's fair. I definitely agree with them being the ballsiest team in the ULCS,
yeah.
which is nice. I like it. I like their willingness to make plays. And if they're definitely able to control that int a little bit more, they could be an amazing team. But I think the result of their last weeks, not only that they've been playing against the two top teams, which was G2 and Misfits, they did play against a reinvigorated Splice. So maybe we might be overreacting on this downward trend, but it's something to note.
No, I think they are definitely a playoffs team. Like like
they're in my top 5 for sure. They're actually 4th in my top 4. So I definitely see them making playoffs again, for sure. It's just more about where in playoffs are they going to land. And in future weeks, would you bet on Vitality over the other teams? I would still put them over any other team in the bottom 5. There is a maybe on Roccat, and yeah, besides that, I think Vitality is still strong. But it's more like Splice, like this is the new team that can actually shake things up.
Yeah, I wouldn't rate them as highly. For me,
they still have a lot to work on, but if we're basing like predictions of these last weeks, we can predict a trend upwards.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And then Roccat G2.
Yeah.
Roccat G2.
That's also quite the interesting match. And you were absolutely on the money when you said that Roccat should attack the top lane if they wanted to beat G2. For me, G2 setups this week have been really disappointing. I didn't understand the whole idea behind going mid Lucian, but not necessarily having a lane you can pressure and then getting outscaled for free. I thought that Roccat was really smart and how they managed the top lane pressure and how they were able to completely control G2's jungle and then constantly gank pairs to sort of get this safe passage into the late game. And also I really loved their draft. So yeah, in general, Roccat is a team I consider pretty strong. I have them in my top 5 of teams, and yeah, I hope we can see better from them on the next weeks even, and a bit better from G2 as well.
Yeah, I actually really loved Rockat's draft. I know we said it on the record episode that we didn't record.
That episode never happened.
When I draft against the Trundle specifically, and something that I kept in mind is that I'm always quite mindful not to try not to draft tanks in the composition. But still try to maintain engage. And the best champion to have in that is obviously Rakan. Rakan is amazing. He's also not a tank, and he's got a lot of mobility, which means that Trundle doesn't really stop him. But I really like that Roccat really bought into this composition where they have the engage and team fighting without tanks, which means that it's not an easy composition to run. You know, having no tanks is not easy, even against Trundle, because that's my opinion. Like, tank compositions are easy to play. You know, so they had Rumble Kindred, which is already a bit complicated, Snowball-esque. Xayah Rakan, great combination, and then Zoe, they got the most OP champ in the game.
Yeah, also, I'm a bit hesitant on complimenting them for such a hard comp to play, because they were playing Zoe against not much engage, so yeah, in general,
and
that's a pretty free setup,
That's something important to mention, is that G2's draft was kind of all over the place. Yeah. They picked the Swain up early. I don't understand why they didn't go for Swain Trundle in the first rotation and pick Alistar. Like, that's a great combination of champions. You've got the engage there, Alistar, Trundle, and Swain for great team fighting, and then you can put Perks and Wonder on these attack damage carries like Lucian, and this Urgot pick was a bit off the wall. I'm not really sure what it was meant to do, but it was kind of there. But yeah, Roccat, I really liked what they did. And about G2 is that I still think they're a top team, but this last week has not been good for them in the compositions that they brought to the table. Number one, at least interesting compositions. Next week, there's no more Funnel. Or Funnel has been nerfed significantly.
For me, G2 is a team that even traditionally, on the previous iteration, they were a bit slow to get reads on patches, but that problem seems to just have duplicated not all of a sudden, but this year I I really get the sense that they are not really good at picking up on new patches. That's what was so surprising about their funnel overall, but I expect to see more of this kind of G2 again. Like I predict they will have a rough time on the next few weeks.
I can see that definitely happening, that these next couple of weeks might not be the most G2 friendly. And that's the review of the last week, and let's move on to predictions, the favorite part of the show.
Wait. Just we have to talk a bit about Misfits versus Fnatic, no?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I completely
we can't
forgot.
Forget that.
The streak is over. Misfits lost their first game against Fnatic, and I really liked... I know, we talked about the draft of Fnatic, and I explained to you why I really liked the Wukong.
Yeah.
In that it's not necessarily just a lane counter pick, but Wukong is just incredibly broken against marksman right now. It's very difficult to play the traditional marksman besides Ezreal that's currently being played, Kai'Sa, Draven, Lucian, which all happen to be Hansama's champion pool against Wukong. So I actually quite liked where Fnatic went with that pick, even though maybe that's not what they were planning, it just kind of fit well together. Their level 1 in the game was excellent as well.
Yeah.
Was a really cool and unique level 1, which got Broxa quite an early lead on Sejuani, which means that he gets to clear faster and get level 6 faster. It's also very nice. What else? That game was...
yeah, for me, the game was a bit of a... I quite preferred Misfits' plan overall.
You kept talking about Misfits' draft being good.
I think the setup was
the Mundo,
really
right? It was about the Mundo.
Not only because of the Mundo, but because Fnatic's plan is absolutely so clear. They have to constantly reset with the Ryze and gank the mid lane, but that's not very efficient against that setup. And then they can trade sides not sides, but they can sort of trade with the Lucian in the bot lane, so you are not in that big of a risk of getting
Hansama did get early kills as well.
Yeah,
exactly. He did get ahead early.
For me, what I quite disliked was that Misfits was very hesitant to send the Lucian mid lane once he had one item finished, and for me that was really a key element of the game, because that meant Senkux could get ganked, then they lost mid lane tier 1, and suddenly you do not have a way to control the mid lane, and Wukong is sort of free around the game. For me, if they had swapped earlier to the mid lane, this was actually Misfits' game to win. I really liked their approach, but unfortunately they did not execute it at the highest level.
The issue with Fnatic's comp, if there was going to be one, was if it comes to 25-30 minutes and they're not like have an overwhelmingly strong lead, they don't necessarily have a champion with enough consistent DPS to kill the Mundo.
Yeah.
They have Ryze, but even then Ryze is just not enough because they had double tanks, an Assassin Diver, and Ryze. So it wasn't really like they were going to kill this Mundo. But the problem is that Yasuo on mid lane first off, it's not good when you're playing melee versus melee. If you're playing melee versus range and you're camping around him, it's good, but Yasuo always wants to be side lane. So Senkux got behind, and he couldn't do much mid lane. Hansama couldn't do much on side lane. So it's like Fnatic got their free snowball.
Yep, pretty much.
And then they got to the teamfight stage, and Mundo wasn't raid boss enough to really just kill them all. And that's a big problem. Is this the end of Misfits?
No.
Definitely not. Is this the rise of Fnatic? Maybe not.
It's the same. In the top two. Like, I feel like Fnatic, they have two things they can do. They can go late game, or they can use Cap's pressure to take over the game, and that's like I'm not saying they need a lot more stuff, because Caps is really such an incredibly amazing player, but for me it was a bit of a classic Fnatic sort of exercise in draft, the game. So I think Fnatic is sort of on the same spot they were weeks before.
I think that a comment that you made as well is that Fnatic uses their individual skill a lot to win games that they probably shouldn't win.
Yep.
Compositionally, and I think that the gap of individual skill isn't as high with Misfits, but there was definitely some in play there.
I can agree to that.
Moving on to predictions now. Sorry, I almost forgot about that. First game is gonna be your top 5 versus H2K. So Roccat versus H2K. I mean, at this point, we can't really reasonably predict H2K to win games.
Yeah, I agree.
We are kind of defaulted to pick Roccat, and it's not even that it's like, oh, this is the shinier of two shits. Roccat actually looks like a good team, and I feel like they won't make the mistakes necessary for H2K to capitalize on. I really liked what they put together against G2, and I don't believe it's a fluke. I think that they have the talent to make it happen. Prophet in itself is also an incredibly strong player. They play through him, Smithy J just goes rage splitting, and they should win against H2K.
Yeah, I don't know. With the whole, if I were to predict H2K against a team, it would have to have a weak jungler, and for me, Memento is one of the strongest junglers in the ULCS. So because they have this tendency to just sort of be on the wrong place at the wrong time constantly in the early game and mess up in skirmishes, I can't see a way in which I would predict Rocket to lose this. I think they take it easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe not easily, but it's definitely clearly in Rocket's favor. Next game, Misfits UOL. It's another kind of like a mismatch because I think Misfits gonna roll over UOL. You mentioned in the recorded episode that we didn't record. I'm just bringing up things that I remember.
Yeah.
Obviously, and also trying to make you feel bad is that you think that
it's not
Unicorns
working.
of Love,
don't worry.
because you have no conscience, of course. Is that Unicorns of Love? You said was an overrated team. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think that in general, there are certain kinds of teams that they draft super aggressive setups and they sort of play snowball in scrims, and then when they get popular among other pro players, people get this sense that, okay, they are good, but they are failing to translate, when actually what I believe is happening is that people in scrims are not as focused and people in scrims are not as scared. So suddenly when you have to play on stage and people are playing much more correctly and you have sort of smaller windows to get more resources because you get smaller windows and fewer windows, in the end the team sort of falls flat and this narrative arises. But for me, UOL is a team that's showing little to no improvement in how they approach the game. They live and die by Exile, and I don't think Exile is even like a top 5 mid laner on the ULCS.
We did mention it in the last episode that Exile is like a gun that will do some serious damage when it actually fires. However, it jams like 3 out of 4 times.
It's like playing Russian roulette. You're sort of
essentially,
gambling with your
every 5 bullets you're going to kill someone. Basically, with that. But that's and sometimes that bullet, that the one bullet that you have shoots you in the head.
Yeah.
But Exile is deadly when he's on point. He's just not on point very often.
Yeah, I agree.
And their Misfits is much more of a complete team. They're definitely first place for a reason, and UOL is not going to be the team to take them to another loss in the ULCS, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Next up, it's actually quite interesting because the first 4 games of this week are all lower tier teams versus higher tier teams. Because next one's going to be Giants Vitality. Excuse me. I think Vitality take this. I'm not convinced by Giants as a team as well. They're definitely lower tier for a reason. They've won some games, but I'm not convinced by those wins. I don't think they can pull a win on Vitality, in my opinion. I think that
we were talking on the other episode about the bot lane mismatch and how that should enable to roam, which is usually a position Vitality finds themselves very comfortable in. And
I think the word that I used was Attila is just way too solid as a player to not let Jack Troll roam, if that makes sense. Like, it's quite difficult to move Attila in lane, so Jack Troll is always getting opportunities to impact the map.
Well, they are also usually counterpick support from the red side and then play Hive Wave Clear, but yeah, I also agree. But I quite like how Attila plays in general.
It's not just about the champions they play; it's about how they play it. You know, like you can give Wulai Timer Digger, he's still gonna flash in every team fight. You know, it doesn't matter. A classic, of course. But you can definitely give credit to draft, but you also have to give credit to the player for playing the draft properly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and they have their style and it works for them. And when I think about the Giants style, I'm getting like a mix between #late game king, which is a complete meme and it's so dumb, but they actually play early game quite well through Joko, and Joko against Julius is going to be an interesting matchup because they're both junglers where if they're given the opportunity, they will just gank. Straight gank. They both say, fuck the camps, fuck the vision control, I'm putting this pink ward to get a gank. Joko is more cheesy than Julius, and I would say Julius is more of a standard ganker. But I would still give Julius the upper hand because I think he has more to work with on his team.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Okay. So we both agree Vitality. Next, Fnatic Schalke.
Fnatic.
I mean, Fnatic wins.
Next.
Sorry, I actually stuck in my next. I mean, do you really want to go over this? Fnatic look good, Schalke don't.
I mean, we can, but I think it's better if we sort of go over the closest matches more instead of just like they're going to get rolled. I expect them to get rolled.
The individual skill level is, I think, a bit too much. And Schalke do rely on that individual skill to... What the hell? Something stuck in my throat. One sec. I have to die real quick.
Well, while you're right, I think you're right. Especially, get the feeling that they rely on Nukdak having a super strong laning phase to sort of enable their transition and around the game whenever they play late, which is usually pretty often. They are really fond of this sort of teamfight compositions. But yeah, overall, even though this split they are playing a lot of Camille, I'm still worried about their setups. And in general, I get the feeling that they still do not have a good read on how to reset. So yeah, I can't predict Fnatic because I think I can't predict Schalke because I feel Fnatic has way more individual talent, but also a better understanding of the game as a whole. I cannot see an advantage Schalke has over Fnatic they can leverage into a victory.
No. What the... What the hell? Why can't I stop coughing? Yeah, what you said. Especially also because about the resets, Fnatic like to play through mid, and a big win condition for Schalke is Nukeduck, so he's not going to get much freedom to really impact the map. If there was a place that Schalke could impact, it would be Chachi, but both Bwipo and especially Soaz are super good at not letting enemy top laners take advantages from the lane.
Yeah.
Next game, Splice G2. Now this is what I would consider a closer one because Splice look better. Circe in particular looks quite good, and G2 I think will have
they
a
look
bad...
terrible.
Not necessarily
for
just
what
terrible.
G2 is.
My prediction is that G2 is not going to have a good read on the meta because now Funnel should be out of the picture, because it is 8.14, and they're gonna bring maybe, I would say standard, but in this meta like standard is like 10 mages or some shit like that, or 10 melee champions. So like really, I don't even know what standard is anymore. But you know what exactly, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I feel like Splice gonna have a decent composition or something planned because they haven't relied on the funnel too much. But G2 lost a big strength of theirs, which was basically let Perks and Wonder carry the game. And I feel like if there was a game that would be an upset, it would be Splice beating G2.
Yeah, it's actually pretty hard for me, but I think I have to predict Splice in general because G2 liked so much to play through mid lane pressure and topside with either very independent lanes when they were playing ADC or now mages that they just can't get forced on. I get the feeling that Splice has been reacting really well to dives, and in general this is a big strength of Cersei, how they read the play in advance and they are able to react in time. And therefore, since G2, I completely agree with you, I expect them to bring quite a poor read. I will have to predict Splice to win. Even though I think G2 is a better team overall, I do not think their styles match correctly.
I think the main bottom line here is that if we think that if G2 comes with a good read on the new patch, they should be able to beat Splice, basically, right?
Yeah, also remember, like, Splice is the same sort of team that they can bring also really bad reads.
Yeah, they could either
picks.
be shit or good.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Splice is also
that series in spring where they had both teams had a terrible read on the swing, which was OP as fuck,
totally
and they were just leaving it open. Yeah, pretty. I don't know.
Next game is a Fiesta game, total Fiesta game. UOL Giants, and we both predicted UOL last time. Let's talk about why. We mentioned Neon.
Yeah,
I think Neon looks quite good as a replacement for Samix. Very talented player, and I also think that UOL's, even though it's like, okay, look, both teams are kind of bad, but if I feel like Giants is so unreliable, which is ironic because UOL is like the epitome of unreliable. But if I were to like trust one team with like the life of my firstborn son, it would be UOL in this case. Especially because I think Cold is also very disciplined as a jungler for such a crazy team. And he might be able to stop Joko from getting his ganks off.
Yeah, for me, the overall sense of watching UOL versus Giants, even though Giants had these few games in the latest weeks that they look better, in general, I got a better feeling from UOL. I quite prefer their approach to the game, even if I dislike both approaches. And yeah, I think they should be able to abuse Giants, mainly because even if Neon would be like the weak point to attack, it's hard to make a case that Neon and Totoro should have a bad time against Steelback and Cernux a lot. I feel like these two players have really been struggling in this split. So overall, I think when it's going to either come to Giants plays late game or Snowball. If they play late game, you will have their field day, and if they play Snowball, both teams are fighting at your
coin flip
strength. So
coin flip,
coin flip, that favors UOL in my mind.
Yeah. Okay. Next is Rocket Vitality. I predicted Vitality, and I think you also said that you predicted Vitality, even though you like Rocket.
For matchup.
Yeah, because of the matchup, and this is also like something that you might like hear people talk about in different games, like in Hearthstone. Like Elemental Mage is broken, but it's matchup reliant. This definitely applies in League of Legends as well, where each team kind of has like a style that they're good at, and if both teams are good at different styles, one team style might be better. For example, like KT's Snowball style is gonna be good against Jin Air's Wait for 90 minutes style. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we believe that
Vitality. I agree with you.
Yeah. I'm just explaining to like the randoms, the plebs, you know, like what we mean by matchup style.
But there's no plebs watching scouting reports. It's all very informed people that have an incredible taste in content. What are you talking about, Broken Shard?
All of you are randoms. You all say that me and Manuel look alike. We don't look alike. Okay, anyway, Vitality style of playing through mid, I think, is quite good. Cabochard is a very solid top laner. I think that Prophet is really good, and Memento and Prophet are really good together. But he's also part of like the French top laners that don't let you take huge leads on them. Especially when he's playing on his comforts, like his Ornn is very good right now. Or any other pick that he might pull out. Gragas is very good right now. I think that's something that Vitality are going to use really well.
Yeah, for me, one of the weaknesses Rocket has is that they do not have necessarily strong communication between Memento and their solo laners. So because Vitality likes so much to target the mid lane, and also because I feel they have a bit of an skill advantage on the bot lane as a whole, they should really be able to pressure Blank in this game and either kill him and get ahead, or move Jizuke to any of both side lanes and pressure. Yeah, when it comes to teams that really like to attack the mid lane, I put a heavy emphasis on mid-jungle communication, and I think that's something that's not as strong for Rocket. So yeah, I have to predict Vitality because of the matchup.
It's like Vitality is mid jungle with support roam, and Rocket is mid top with North Skirt on Playmaker.
Yeah,
essentially.
And also Memento like being really smart about vision.
Wait, mid top. Sorry, top jungle. Did I say mid top? I meant top jungle. Sorry.
Yeah.
Next is going to be Schalke G2. I mean, G2 should win this because I think even though Schalke has also looked bad and G2 has looked bad, I still rate G2 over Schalke as a team. Should G2 come with a really bad, I'm talking like astronomically terrible, like you think you're reading like Cat in the Hat, but you're actually reading the Encyclopedia of a Doctorate, you know, that bad of a read.
Yeah.
On this meta, they might lose to Schalke. It's just quite unlikely.
I'm just going to take the gamble. I'm just going to say Schalke. I'm going to say G2 come out with a terrible read. In general, I do not get the feeling that Schalke has bad reads on patches, even if I dislike other aspects of their gameplay. And if they are going to upset a team, we talked about this on the previous episode, they would upset G2. I think they are in a very good position to sort of, you know, they have a skilled mid laner that shouldn't be pressured that easily by perks. They can have a better read, and if they go into these sorts of team fight compositions, it's not like G2 does much more than fighting as well. So yeah, I think they have a matchup. In theory, G2 should be favorite, but I'm going to go with Schalke. I'm going to be ballsy, be inspired by Vitality.
You want to make a bet? Do you want to make a bet then?
If you win, because I think G2 are the favorite.
Okay, if you win, right? I have to put your picture on Twitter as my profile picture for a week.
Okay.
But if I win, you have to put mine as your Twitter profile picture. Deal?
Yeah, deal.
Deal? Okay. I think G2 is gonna win. We've got a bet going on here.
But wait, what Twitter? Do you mean at Cabra Maravilla and at Broken Shard, where everyone can follow us? Yes?
Yes. At Cabra Maravilla and at Broken Shard. Specifically at Broken Shard. Don't follow that other random. But essentially, yes. Those Twitters, exactly. This next game is actually something that we talked about. It's gonna be Fnatic H2K. I think Fnatic are gonna win, and it's pretty obvious why we think Fnatic are gonna win. We don't need to go in, but like, just watch it.
Are you
watch
sure?
H2K,
Seems risky.
watch H2K win this game. I'm telling you. Like, I sometimes get these feelings about these games, and there's no real analytical response to why besides this team's just gonna get cocky.
Yeah.
Fnatic are super good as a team. They've got obvious issues on their team, but I feel like they're not as big. And they're definitely, there's a reason why they're in the top 2, top 3 of EU. Now, H2K are gonna blue shell Fnatic. I think like it just like all the dominoes are falling into place here, man. Like, just watch how H2K beat Fnatic. It's gonna be a complete shit show, and H2K are gonna win.
Okay, then I predict Fnatic, and we have an interesting prediction as well, because I do not think there's any way in hell, no matter how cocky Fnatic get, that H2K should win. Again, I think they can have a strong game if they are able to get out of the early game safely, but in general, I do not feel...
Getting out of the early game against Fnatic is difficult.
Yeah, that's so pretty hard, and if Fnatic just go for like a scaly composition, H2K is absolutely destroyed. I get the feeling.
Watch what's gonna happen. They're gonna put Reckless. Yeah. H2K are gonna snowball on them. And
maybe it can happen. It can happen, but I do not think there is any rationale in which you can construct an H2K victory. Like, for me, it's quite Fnatic.
Quite unlikely.
Yeah.
I don't really have any basis to say why I think they'll win. I still do think Fnatic are the better team, and I would actually put Fnatic as my prediction. But like. Just watch H2K are gonna win.
Trust it. I predict
I trusted it.
You have to go full faith.
Last one is an interesting one because it's gonna be Misfits Splice. Misfits are clearly the better team, but I think Splice. This matchup is actually more interesting than it is, even though I think Misfits win it.
Yeah, for me this matchup is a lot about the narrative of the junglers, but sort of like I get the feeling that, not the feeling, but actually what happened is Maxlor really outplayed Xerxes in 2 of the 3 games they've played this year as a whole, and that really set the tempo for the whole game, where it just started snowballing out of control. But Xerxes also outplayed Maxlor in the first clear of the other game, and that also snowballed out of control. So I'm really excited to see both these junglers match, because even though I consider Maxlor to be the undisputed best in EU, for me Xerxes is such a creative guy that this has to be an interesting jungle matchup by force. There's no way around it.
Yeah, it's gonna be on the jungle matchup. I think both mid laners are a bit iffy at times. Yeah, I think iffy is a great word to describe it. And also should also mention that I think that Mickey X and Hansama are much better than Kobe and Kasing. In lane, definitely in lane. And I would give the edge to Misfits, but it's like I think it's really going to be like the main people that we're looking at, and the main people that we need to watch out for, and the ones that are going to do the most damage in this game. It's going to be Maxlor Xerxes. Yeah. And if there is a way that that Splice actually do win this game, it will be off Xerxes popping off with some unique strategy or some crazy pathing that catches Maxlor off guard, and then they're able to snowball through that or get substantial leads through that. My prediction is still going to be Misfits, though.
In general, I think they have a very good matchup. The fact that they can abuse the enemy bot lane is really good for Maxlor, who can invade Xerxes and sort of nullify the threat of that whole idea. But yeah, I completely agree. I think Misfits should take this game.
Yeah, I don't think there is anything much more to say. That's it for the week, and. Obviously, we kind of rushed this episode a bit because I'm really pissed off at Manuel for fucking up as usual. But anything else you want to say? Like, I think that this week there's a lot of potentially close games. Vitality
not the first day. The first day it's a bit stompy. I feel.
First day is stompy as hell.
Yeah,
but it's more like the following days for sure. After that, there's a lot of potential for not necessarily upsets. And even the games that are one-sided, like we talked about like potential ways where these lower tier teams can pick up wins. But the one I'm looking forward to most is I'm looking forward to Unicorns of Love and Giants bashing their heads against each other for about 30 minutes.
Yeah, I also would like to die young and enjoy that game. So we'll see you guys next week. And if you
Next week, yeah.
any kind of insight or questions you have, you can just tweet at any of us. We all are the same person after all, so if you know one, you know the other, and we'll try
but
to...
if you have to choose to follow which Twitter, it should be mine at Broken Shard. It's the better Twitter of the two. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, you guys know that usually the people that gloat are the people that really are the best. So yeah, you can follow Broken Shard for sure. You can follow me for objectively worse content, but as you prefer. And yeah, we'll see you next week, and until then, fuck off.
Yeah, fuck off. Fuck off.